Thank you very much, Peter, and good evening, everyone. And it's really nice to be with you this evening. When I look around this world, it just appears to me that it's in a bit of a mess. And I just feel, as you probably do too, I feel I'm a rational, logical sort of person. I have engineering qualifications. I work in the government department as a manager, widely read. I'm sure you think that you're logical and rational as well. When I look around this world, I sometimes wonder what's going on. And is this a world that I really want my children to grow up in? Is this a world that my little baby grandchildren have a future in? What's happening out there? And it doesn't take long to keep an eye on the news, start asking some questions, doesn't it? You take a look at the few things that have happened over the last perhaps 6 months. You may remember this one here when the Papua New Guinean police force went on strike over their wages. No law and order, and everyone went in and stole and looted from the shopping centres there. And in Europe, we've had an increase in anti-Semitism and racism over there. Look at that banner, clean the world by putting the Jews in the bin, in a march in Poland in October last year. And I don't know the answer to this one. I doubt you do either, but the China Coast Guard has had a lot of activity in Taiwan, claiming most of the waters there as their own and wants to take Taiwan by force. The history's murky. I don't know where that's going. I don't know what should happen. I don't think they know what should happen either, but it worries me. I wonder where that's going to go. And you might remember this one, the very, very sad mass shooting in Maine, Boston, in the US in October last year, where 19 people died, including the perpetrator. A very sad man, a sad man who heard voices in his head, was allowed by the authorities to possess an automatic firearm and took the death, the life of all of these people. On average, the United States has seen more than 39,000 deaths by gun per year since 2014, and that's through mass shootings and domestic violence and suicide. 39,000 deaths by gun every year. And very, very sadly, we saw that closer to home, didn't we, in April, just last month, in a bustling Sydney mall, where another challenged man, an unwell man, took the life of 6 people. And we saw that very locally, didn't we? You might be keeping an eye on the climate, and the world is getting hotter and hotter. And the year 2023, so that's last year, has now been confirmed as the warmest on record. And in fact, the last 9 years, one after the other, the last 9 years have each been the warmest year on record, one after the other, with 2023 being the latest. Last year, 2023, had more than 200 of the 365 days set a new daily global temperature record for that time of year. And I'm a subscriber to The Economist magazine. I love their reporting, sometimes witty. You can see their cover on the screen there. They've got a report card on climate change. Overall, some progress, must try harder. We're getting a B+ for making a commitment, a D- keeping the incomplete climate finance, investments got a D, renewables a C+, adaptation a D as well. And you'd be familiar that the COP28 summit was held in Dubai last December, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and delegates from more than 110 countries came together to improve renewable and energy capacity and capability, and all the big oil companies didn't sign because they didn't want it, because it worked. And we're entering the new era of synthetic reality. What is reality? What do you think is reality? And AI does incredible things, going to change our lives, many of them for the good. It can be used to forecast weather, diagnose diseases. I read recently of a new novel way to predict ship-killing rogue waves. It's an amazing thing. And you might have heard of a company called OpenAI, which was founded as a non-profit organization, as a research lab which aimed at developing AI, and its mission is that AI can equal or surpass humans in all types of thinking. All types of thinking. Wow. What's it going to do? How can you believe it? What is information? What is disinformation? When you Google in 5 years, what's going to be worldwide web? And all that leads into a gentleman that you would have heard as well through a certain film that was made, I suspect last year, a gentleman called Robert Oppenheimer. He didn't make it. A very famous film was made about him. And he and his fellow US scientists developed the atomic bomb, which was then used for the first time in 1945. What you may not know is that 2 years later, in 1947, he was so worried about the consequences of this new atomic bomb and the havoc that it wreaked in Japan. So he then developed the doomsday clock, and it's set each year, every single year. Amazing, isn't it? By the International Bulletin of the Atomic Science. And they met in January this year on the 23rd of that month to reset it, and they kept it at the closest ever been to midnight, just 90 seconds to midnight. And that's how you can track it. It's an amazing little thing. This is a bit of history. It's a fact. I'm not being a doomsday proclaimer here. But when Oppenheimer set it up back in 1947, he said they were 7 minutes to midnight. He was worried. And it went out to 17 minutes after the end of the Cold War in 1991, when people started to breathe again after all that potential conflict between the US and Russia. And then it's closed back down to 9 minutes, to 5 minutes, to 3 minutes. It's now at 90 seconds. And they tell us the reason for setting it at only 90 seconds. And the reasons are international expense on nuclear arsenals, the war in Ukraine, a lack of action on climate change, risks linked to misusing emerging biological technologies, and artificial intelligence. That's interesting. So is this a good world? Does it offer us a future? Now, you probably get a lot of enjoyment out of your day-to-day life. But if we sit down and just mull over that question for a little while and just look out to the future as we take our eyes away from the daily news, what does this world offer? Where's it all going? Well, the prophet Jeremiah in the Bible that we read from tonight offers us a wonderful insight into the minds of men. Jeremiah wrote and says, I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks direct his steps. He acknowledged some 2,500 years ago that we're not very good at directing our future, at controlling our destiny, and we don't always make good decisions. It's not in man to direct his steps. He acknowledged that for God. And so it's a relief to me, and I hope it's a relief to you, that when we look at the Bible says that even though we can't direct our steps, that the God who created this world and lives in the heavens above has got it all in hand. Now that's a big statement. That's what the Bible claims is happening. Whatever's happening out there and all the stuff that's happening in this world, the Bible makes this huge. Shall we for a second call it audacious claim that God's got it all in hand? And that's what we're going to have a look at tonight. So we'll go to this quote next. And this is God speaking now, as recorded by his servant and prophet Isaiah in chapter 46. God says, I am God, but there is none like me. There's no other gods like me. I am the God. I declare the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. What an incredible verse. But God is saying here, there is no other God like me. You know, all you ancients, you might have worshipped those gods of stone. And we still worship gods of iron. They've just got wheels on them today, don't they? And he says, I'm the one that declares the end, what's going to happen from the beginning, from now or even before. And from ancient times, I can declare things that have not yet been done. I'm the only one that can say, my counsel shall stand and I'm going to do my purpose. None of that we can say. You know, we can probably suggest that tomorrow morning we're going to get up and I'm going to hopefully have my porridge for breakfast. And then I'm going to do this and this and this. There's no guarantee at all. With God, God says there's an absolute guarantee. Everything that I purpose will happen. So that's the thing that we're going to explore tonight. And what I'd like to do is to have a look at that through 2 case studies around the world. And then we'll make some conclusions at the end. 2 case studies to show just how God has the things of this world in his control. So the first one, let's consider the current conflict that exists in Israel and Gaza. It's a terrible situation. It's a sad situation. Our heart goes out to every single person involved. And we have in that area, don't we, some groups of people that are fighting for their existence, fighting to create a homeland, fighting potentially against other people they don't like. That's the neighborhood that they live in. We have Gaza, who's home to 2.2 million people, one of the most densely populated places on earth. We have next door Israel, a nuclear power, generally with Western backing. We have Lebanon up there in the north, whose main leading political power is a military power, a military group that has an estimated 150,000 missiles aimed at Israel. And then further to the east, we have Iran, who's verging on nuclear capability with a mandate to destroy Israel. It's a tough place to live, isn't it? You know, sometimes in Sydney, sometimes in Adelaide, we get upset when our rubbish doesn't. You imagine living in that. All those different people, all those different factors, all that conflict, all that challenge between them. I feel for. This is not easy. And so we recall that time in October last year when a group called Hamas said enough is enough. And they got a whole lot of bulldozers and pushed the fence down and entered into Israel and attacked it. And the issue we have here is a classic issue of conflict, where 2 people claim the same area as their own. Not just their own land, but their own religious sites as well. They both claim Jerusalem as the heart and their religious center. And they can't settle their differences. And so Hamas said, we're going in. And unfortunately, the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, didn't do himself any favors in September last year when he held up a map of the new Middle East. And you can see there the complete absence of the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. Very insensitive, mocking every associated United Nations resolution process. And so Hamas launched about 5,000 rockets at Israel that morning in a surprise attack. And about 100 people were killed, mostly civilians. More Jews were killed that day than any other day since the Holocaust in the Second World War. And Israel has since said, right, we're not happy with that, and we're going to destroy Hamas and remove them as a threat. And in the process, the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health reports that nearly 35,000 Palestinians in Gaza died in that process. And many have debated the delivery of aid and services to Gaza in that time. What a mess. This is what the economists prize picture and cover it as the front cover. You know, you can see the first one there, Israel's agony as they felt that. 1,200 people killed, 240 people taken hostage, just minding their own business, doing what you and I perhaps do on Saturday, and their life was changed forever. And then the second cover looks at the response from that poor little Palestinian girl. She's in the midst of Gaza. She's feeling the brunt of decisions for adults to make when she can get her life back, when she next goes to school. Has she been one of 35,000 people that have died? What hospital care will she ever get? And then the Economist tries to have a look at the future of it, and you can see their cover on the right there. They try and grapple with how peace is possible, and the butterfly with the two flags on it, on a background of dry, parched earth riddled with bullet holes. Not easy. Notice the first two covers are black. They're grappling with the issue that exists there. Well, it's gone from very, very bad to even a little bit worse. You know, Israel then had an airstrike in the Iranian consulate. And then later on, the Iranians said, we're not taking that. And they sent 300 drones and associated attack back on Israel, most of which were intercepted and some got through. And it's scary, isn't it? Now, I don't pretend to get the answer to that, but I know it's not easy. When you've got that magnitude of the conflict and no easy way forward. So what we can do now is say, all right, God has already said and claims that he's got it all in control. And he said he knows the future from the ancient of time. So we can go to the Bible, and the Bible reassures us that this sort of thing is going to happen. That's a big claim as well, isn't it? So let's track that. Let's come to our reading tonight that Peter read for us in Zechariah and chapter 12. You know, there's Palestinians in Gaza and all the Israelis with their competing claims over that soil and history. They're at the very center of this tension. So let's just read on the screen, or maybe if you've got a Bible on your lap, the first 4 verses of the oracle of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding people. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the people. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. On that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness. Let's work through that. What is Zechariah telling us? Well, the first thing we note in the first verse there is that this is an oracle or a story or a burden even. This is not Nina's lighted story. This is heavy. This is a burden. And it's from God, it's from the Lord, and it's about Israel. That sets the scene, isn't it? But look who it comes from. There's more detail that's offered there. So that's the first thing we'll note. It's a burden, oracle from God about Israel. The second thing is who God claims to be. Thus declares the Lord, the God who way, way, way back stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. I am the God of the whole. I'm not a God of one nation. I'm not just the God of Abraham. These are my credentials in verse 1. I am the God of the entire earth. And in fact, the universe. That's the second thing to note about these verses. And then we go on, and we can see that this little prophecy that Zechariah is presenting in chapter 12 is going to impact all people. Did you see the emphasis there? I like colouring things in my Bible. This is a little theme that you may take a note of to do later as well. Verse 2, this is going to impact all the surrounding people. Verse 3, I'm going to make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the people, all who live it will get hurt. All the nations of the earth gather. Verse 4, every port, every is going to get impacted by this topic. What's the next thing we're going to know? Well, the next thing we'll note is that it's about Jerusalem, and it's going to be described in two ways. This whole earth, says God, is going to feel Jerusalem as a cup of staggering. And that concept in the word there in the original Hebrew was staggering or trembling. It means to reel as if you were drunk, as if you were intoxicated. It's a trembling. People that come to Israel and try and tangle with it just go away drunk from this cup. It's so difficult, says God. It's so difficult, says Zechariah. And more than that, there's another word picture in the second verse, in the next verse, rather, in verse 3. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone. So in verse 2, it was a cup of staggering. In verse 3, it's a heavy stone. Two word picture. And that heavy stone is something that's heavy or burdensome. Other translations suggest that it means cups themselves. And if you're a little bit familiar with Hebrew, which some of you may be, it adopts a really interesting Hebraism where it repeats a word to show the scale of the matter. So, for example, if you know a little bit of your Bible in the Old Testament, it talks about the most holy place. There's no word there for most. The Hebrew just says holy, holy place. Here it says heavy, heavy stuff. It's a reeling, reeling stuff. It's impacted for, it's repeated for emphasis. It's cut in pieces, cut in pieces. And these two verses are saying that all nations are going to get caught up in this Jerusalem problem. If they drink the cup, they're going to reel in intoxication. If they try and lift the heavy stone, they're going to get completely cut to pieces. And then in verse 4, God is saying that every horse will be stricken with panic, its rider with madness. Now, I don't think that the horses that Zechariah had in his day would be applicable today. I think that would be talking about modern war equipment and modern armies and modern commanders and people that go and try and intervene, and ambassadors speak on all of these countries. And Zechariah says they're going to panic. And it's so hard. That's what Zechariah said. So if we summarize Zechariah, he's telling us, I've got some heavy news about Israel coming from the God of the whole world. It's going to impact all nations. And Jerusalem, at the center of the earth, that's currently claimed as the eternal city of Israel and Hamas and other nations, will be a cup of staggering and a heavy stone, and nations are going to be really hurt and thrown. Now, if you had never read that before, I suggest you say, what? That doesn't say that about Sydney, does it? Or anywhere else, really, in the world. It says it about Jerusalem. And we're seeing that right now. And to King Bible students, that event on the 7th of October last year was devastating, but not a complete surprise, because that's where so much challenge of this world comes from. And so look at the enormity and the magnitude of what's happened here. In the weeks after that issue, look at the world leaders that visited Israel after that event. US President Biden, Anthony Blinken, the American Secretary of State, the British MP, PM, Rishi Sunak, France's President Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Olaf Scholz, Italy's Giorgia Meloni, the EU head Ursula von der Leyen, Australia's Scott Morrison, ex-UK PM Boris Johnson. can you think of another place in the world that good would go when something goes wrong? And then there were others that commented on it that didn't visit. And there was the Iranian president, Ebrahim Raisi, and the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and the Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, all had their things to say. What brought these people together? An incredible group of the who's who of the world leaders in 2023. It's because Zechariah said Jerusalem is going to be a cup of stagnation. It's going to be a really heavy stone, and all nations will be impacted. And things have continued from there, haven't they? Some people have done this and put Israeli flags on walls. This one's pinned down in London. And some people have done this and had lots of protests through the world and said there's millions of Palestinians that don't have a home and should have a home, and they're being picked on. Right now in Columbia University, there's occupation there, isn't there? And there's marches, you can see that from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. And then it impacts the world further. Look at all the shipping incidents and the attacking of vessels in the Red Sea there by the Houthis. Who's the Houthis? They're an Iranian-backed small group based in Yemen. Just so happens that a lot of the world's shipping trade goes right past their doorstep. And it's super, super easy to lob a missile out and take those ships out. That's what all of those red dots on the left of the screen. Look at the right side. The top there is normal shipping routes taken from November last year. You can see all the green dots. The bottom is where they're all now heading around the Cape of Good Hope because no one wants to go through the Red Sea because of the Houthis, because of Israel, because the Houthis don't like Israel and they're standing for Palestinians. This is the impact. This is Zechariah chapter 12 today. And so the economists still grapple how peace is possible, how to end the Middle East agony, pouring a fire extinguisher onto flames in that area. How's it going to happen? How's this two-state process going to be initiated? How's it going to be resolved? It's not a pleasant future there at the moment. It all looks very good. But what a wonderful thing. God said in Zechariah 12, I know what man's going to do, and I know what's going to happen. Let's go on to the second case study. This is another interesting one. And it's a war that's happening right now in most of our news between Russia and Ukraine. And I don't know the answers there. And I don't have any allegiance to either of these nationalities or groups. But again, it's a very scary one, and I feel for those people that are involved. And what happened, as you might recall, is on the 24th of February, just over 2 years ago at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, the Russian president, Mr. Putin, announced that Russia was moving ahead with a special military operation to enter into the neighboring Ukraine. And he launched the biggest attack by one state on another in Europe since World War II. And this has resulted in 10 million refugees fleeing Ukraine, and civilian fatalities in the tens of thousands after that process. And it's an amazing thing. It happened just 2 years ago. And what Mr. Putin tried to do was essentially similar to what Saddam Hussein tried to do when he attempted to take over Kuwait in 1990. And people have very strong views on this. They think, for Ukraine, you've been invaded, and they think Russia, you've got a right to do that. Or they think the West, you should mediate. Or they think the West, you've provoked. It's a difficult one, isn't it? What's the answer? Well, here's an image of the before and after. The left side is the day before, let's call it an invasion. You can see the little salmony pink bits there that were occupied by Russia beforehand. And on the right-hand side is those areas that were occupied by Russia a mere 5 weeks later. At one point, nearly 25%, a fifth of the country. oscillating about 18, 19, 20% of that area. And Ukraine says, if you want to talk to us, we're only going to talk to you about peace when you get out of all of those salmony pink areas. And Russia says to Ukraine, well, sorry, but the pinky salmony areas are the new norm. They're the new realities. Accept it. Move on. Where are we going to start talking in the future? That's not easy to work. And again, The Economist magazine contemplates this move that Mr. Putin made 2 years ago. And it wrote that it would be terribly risky and terribly costly, but it would make Putin, the Russian leader who restored much of historical Russia and established a new battle against NATO, and maybe that's why he's done it. An amazing thing. Living in Sydney, Adelaide was very isolated by this sort of news, aren't you? And this too has been a constant on all of the magazine covers. You know, that first iconic one there in The Economist with the red and the yellow flag and bleak and the World Health Book. And then there was a future of Ukraine, and then Ukraine tried to strike back, and then they were building 2.0, and then they thought they'd cracked Mr. Putin, but now it's time for a big rethink because this looks like he's going to win that war. We don't know. But the odds really look in his favor, don't they? Now, what's interesting, friends, as in Isaiah 46, that big claim that God said, I know all of these things are going to happen. Well, the Bible gave us some hints that this might happen as well. So let's have a look at them. Here's another prophecy. I've got it on the screen, on the slide, and you can read there with me, or you can turn it up in the Bible if you have one as well. Ezekiel in chapter 38. So this is another prophet. Zechariah was a prophet, and Ezekiel was a prophet. And Zechariah 38, verse 2, says the most interesting thing. The Son of Man, set your face towards Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh and Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against them. And say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshach and Tubal, and I'm going to bring you out and all of your army and horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host, all of them with buckler and shield, wielding swords. Persia, Put, and Put are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Now that's a lot to take in if you've never read that before. But you can see that in verse 2 it's saying, Ezekiel, son of man, I want you to set your face and prophesy against this thing called Gog that comes from a land called Magog, who's a prince of this group here, and say, I'm against you. I'm going to bring you out with all of your forces. So that's not horses anymore, is it? That's modern warfare equipment, all of their tanks, all of their aircraft, all of their ships, fully clothed with armor, a huge host, a great host. And who's with them? Well, there's Push and Push and the Persian Push and others. I'd like you to focus on those highlighted areas. So set your face towards Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, and in verse 5, the reference there that Persia is accompanying this group. Let's try and interpret them. Well, if we do that, we find, with a little help from the commentators and the Hebrew lexicons, etc., that Gog means the one at the top. He's the leader. Set your face against Gog. He's the main man, so to speak. The leader of this group that comes with him. And he's of the land of Magog. Now, I think that's spectacularly interesting. Because again, when we go back to our history books and do some online research, which is very, very easy these days, we find that Magog includes the area of Ukraine. Who would have guessed that? And Central Europe. Go of the land of Magog, the area which covers Ukraine and Central Europe. I can't go into more detail about that tonight, but I can. proving that Magog is from that area, the ancient Scythian area. And the Prince of Rosh, and Rosh is an ancient word for Russia. Now, I'm not going to expect you to take my word for that. If we were to go to some very well-esteemed, very well-credentialed people to work out what Rosh was, there's no better place to start than with Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, first published in 1776, an iconic work and an all-time great in the history of the Roman Empire. There is none that equals him. And he wrote that among the Greeks, this national appellation, means name, that is the Russian, has a singular form of Rus. So when Ezekiel 38, excuse me, talks about Rus or Rosh, Edward Gibbon suggests that that means he's referring to the Russian. Here's another one. Gesenius, in his Hebrew Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament. A lexicon is really just a dictionary, first published in 1829, another iconic work on Bible words. He says that this is the proper noun of a northern nation and that Rush here was undoubtedly the Russian. And another one. So this is Samuel Bocart in his work Sacred Geography, first published in 1646. You won't have one of them at home. And Bocart writes, Ross is the most ancient form under which history makes mention of Russia. You don't need to take my word. These are three iconic authors, standouts in our field. And they're all concluding that Rus is Russia. And that's the group that Ezekiel, in his 38th chapter, just happens to be talking about. Set your face against Go, the one at the top, of the land of Magog, the land of Ukraine. Chief prince, the prince of Rosh, the prince of Russia. So we can map them, we can chart them. There we have them in Europe there. Rosh is Russia. Magog is that broader expanse of land covering Ukraine and Belarus and Poland and Slovakia and Hungary and Romania today. We can plot them. And Mr. Putin is very, very clear about his intent to get Ukraine back. In fact, he claims Russia was robbed when it lost Ukraine. And he says, I'm confident that the true sovereignty of Ukraine is possible only in partnership with Russia. We've got to come back. That's why he wants. That's why Mr. Putin went into Ukraine. But Ezekiel also said that Gog was going to be of the land of Magog. What an amazing thing. And then we go on after that and we work out that it's accompanied by Persia in verse 5. And Persia, I think you'd pick up from our study school, is modern day Iran. So Russia has this huge army, which it does, Ezekiel says, and then it's got a list of countries that are supporting it in its endeavors, in its war. And the very, very first country on that list of supporters is Iran. Who would have picked that? Well, again, The Economist noted in 2022, sorry, this is the BBC News here noted, in December 2022, that Iran, or Persia, is now Russia's or Russia's top military backer, they call it. Iran is now the single country that gives Russia its biggest military support. Incredible. And Ezekiel got that right 2,500 years ago. Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Russia, and Iran. And Iran is supporting Russia with a fully fledged defense partnership, drones, weapons development, and training. And so when we understand the context of this, we have this huge northern confederacy, and the rest of the chapter goes on, which we won't look at tonight. There's many, many people. There's heaps of military equipment. and they come down like a storm, and the chapter tells us they're going to come down and invade Israel. Israel's involved again because Jerusalem is a burdensome stone to all nations. No wonder, friends, that God in Isaiah 46 said, there is none, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things that are not yet done. My counsel will stand, and I will accomplish all. And it's as if God speaks and he prophesies things through his prophets that will happen in the future. And all of history happens in history like water coming out of a bottle into a glass. History has no choice but to go in that glass and fill the mold that prophecy said it has. That prophecy is the mold into which history is poured. It has no choice. God has said that's what will happen. And so it has no choice but to completely fill that mold into which it's being poured. Now, if we have a little look at some logic then, there's lots of Bible prophecies that we could consider that have already been fulfilled. One standout one in the Bible is the re-establishment of the nation of Israel. There's Bible prophecies that are currently being fulfilled. The Middle East conflict, the expansion of Russia, this world in turmoil. And so on that basis, Bible prophecies about the future will also be fulfilled. And I have complete confidence in the prophecies of God based on God's words in Isaiah 46. I am God, and I speak the end from the beginning. That all of those prophecies that have been fulfilled, the ones that are being fulfilled right now, mean that future prophecies will also come. So let's speak about them. There's a man called Abraham, and I'm in awe of him. He lived in a big, big city about 4,000 years ago in Ur, which was in ancient Mesopotamia. And he was an idolater, and he worshipped all sorts of crazy gods, because that's what the Mesopotamians all did. And God appeared to him with a promise and said, Abraham, I want you to leave Ur, which was a very modern city at the time, with running water and sewage systems and a lot of well-developed systems at the time. I want you to leave that, and I want you to go to a place called Canaan. And I'm going to give it to you. It's going to be yours. And I'm not just going to give it to you, Abraham. I'm going to give it to a seed, a descendant of yours, who would be born a couple of thousand years in the future. And we know his name now. His name was Jesus Christ, the son of Abraham. And Jesus was born. And he taught and did a whole lot of things. In fact, he made his own prophecies. He lived a wonderful life. He changed the world, changed our dating system. He changed our laws, changed our legislation. So much of our life now is based on Christian principles. Even things like having one wife, obeying the road law, going to prison if you do the wrong thing. And he died on the cross at the hands of the Romans, but was resurrected and he lived again. So Jesus Christ made his own prophecies. And what was one iconic prophecy that he made? Well, in Luke chapter 21, he made his very own prophecy. And look at that, it's about Jerusalem again. And he said there in verse 20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, so at some point, Jerusalem is going to have armies all around it. Then know that its desolation has come near. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are inside the city depart or get out. These are days of vengeance, not a nice time. Alas, for women who are pregnant, they're going to have trouble. There will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against its people, and they're going to fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem is going to be trampled underfoot by all the Gentiles, the non-Jews, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. What a terrible prophecy. Jerusalem would be ripped apart by all of these other armies. And it's a time of vengeance. And God says, I'm not happy with what you've been doing. And this is what I'm going to do. When did this? Well, we can see there that Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, and they would fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive. And you go to Wikipedia and go to the history books, and that happened very, very clearly. It happened in AD. And it was a terrible, terrible time when the Romans came down and surrounded that city and burnt it, pulled every stone in the Temple Mount apart to get at the gold. And the Jews didn't listen to Jesus, and they didn't run, and they didn't go to the mountains. Many, many, many of them lost their lives, and that city was ransacked and lost to the Jews. But what did it say? Until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So Jesus, as it were, put a sunset clause on that. This is what's going to happen, and the city is going to be trampled by non-Jews and lived by non-Jews until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. When was that? Well, that happened maybe in a year that some of you can remember, back in 1967, when iconic shots like this were taken as Jewish forces managed to take that city again. What an amazing prophecy. But then Jesus went on. There's going to be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars and on the earth, and there's going to be distress. This is what we're talking about tonight. Verse 26, people will be fainting with fear and with foreboding of what's coming on the earth. It's not a great life that's going to happen after that. When's that going to happen? That's happening right now. And then Jesus went on again in verse 27, and then, after all of that stress, after all of those issues, after all of that turmoil, the Son of Man, where do we see that expression? In Ezekiel 38, verse 1 and 2, Son of Man. Then they'll see the Son of Man, Jesus, coming in a cloud, back to earth with power and great glory. When's that going to happen? Well, very soon, because the turmoil and stress is now. And finally, in this prophecy, Jesus says, now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. In other words, get ready. This should be exciting. We've seen in AD 70 the desolation of Jerusalem. We've seen in 1967 it come back to the Jews. Tick that box. We're seeing all the perplexity with the sun, moon, and stars. That doesn't mean in the sun and the sky, does it? It means the ruling parties, the powers of this earth. This is what Christ and the people in his day spoke and thought like. We've seen the distress of nations in the earth and the roaring of the sea. And so we have confidence that Christ will come back. And I can summarize that for you very neatly in a little table. Verses 20 to 24 spoke about the destruction of Jerusalem happened in AD 7. Verse 24 spoke about the retaking of Jerusalem, which happened in 1967. Verses 25 and 6 spoke about a world in turmoil, which is happening right now, not great world to live in. And verse 27 says Jesus is going to come back, and I think that's going to be very soon. And verse 28 says, let's get ready. So my last question is this worth getting ready for? I've got a good job in this life, a family, and I've got rent. Living in Australia, it's not actually too bad. Is this new world worth getting ready for? Well, the Bible says that it's not only worth getting ready for, but it is going to be amazing. Absolutely. And here's a couple of quotes. The first one from the Old Testament in Isaiah again. That in these latter days, What's going to happen, says Isaiah, is that the house of the Lord is going to get established as the highest of all the mountains. The place that we go to worship this God will be the highest of all mountains. And every nation is going to go to it. Say, I want to go and see God, meet his son, and worship him. And they're going to say, come and let us go up to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. This whole earth is going to be full of God's glory, and his house and his principles and his concepts are going to be like the highest mountain, and everyone is going to want to go see. And in the New Testament, there's a passage in Revelation called What a Nice Time. That God is going to wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. For the former things, the things of this life, the things of this world have passed away. I suspect that verse is very meaningful for you, very meaningful for me. I've been impacted by some of those things. I have a very dear friend in Adelaide who I don't know how long he will live. He's still in his 60s, and he has inoperable cancer, and he will go through. But there will come a time, friends, where every single tear from every single person will be wiped. When Jesus Christ comes back to this earth and just rids it of all of the problems we've been talking about, all of the issues, all of the unsolvable, all of the things that I genuinely, honestly don't know how to sort out, or even which are right, Jesus is going to come back and sort all of it. So in conclusion, let's know that, yeah, I think this world is a crazy place. And if my granddaughters are still here as adults, I really don't know what it's going to be like. But Bible prophecies can be trusted, and they've been trusted for past prophecies and present ones, and on that basis, I have complete confidence that future ones can be trusted as well. And tonight we've had a look at Ezekiel in 38, we've had a look at Zechariah in chapter 12, we've had a look at Luke in chapter 21, and all of them are exactly on track. And I have so much confidence that the things that the Bible says that are yet to happen will. And I also read in the Bible that God, the creator of the heaven and the earth, wants all of us to be part of his kingdom. In fact, in the New Testament, he expressly writes that he is not willing that any single person would perish. It might not look like that when you look around the world, but that's what God writes of himself. He says, sometimes man does silly things, but I don't want to lose anyone. And finally, as Jesus said, now it's time to get ready. Because I believe all this is going to happen, and now